This video will show you how to complete the questions on homework number 10. Let's take a look at the first topic, graphing lines from equations. And for this topic, you'll be given an equation in slope-intercept form. That means that this number in the constant position is the y-intercept, and this number here in the coefficient position is known as the slope. The y-intercept is a point directly on the y number line axis here. So if the y-intercept is -4, you would click on -4. The slope is a set of directions to the next point. Every slope has to be a fraction because it has to tell you two things: the change along the y number line and the change along the x number line. We call that delta y and delta x. Now you notice the fraction here had a negative sign on the side. A negative sign on the side must be moved to either the numerator or the denominator of the fraction. But it can't be left on the side because you can't use it more than once. It has to be given to one of the values, either the numerator or the denominator. I like to give it to the numerator because it's easier for me to move up and down. So from this y-intercept point of -4, I'm going to move along the y-axis -1 or down 1. And then I'm going to move along the x-axis +2 or right 2. And that's where I'm going to click my mouse the second time. So again, the first point you click is the y-intercept. The second point is the directions after you follow the slope. So down 1, right 2. And then submit. Let's try this one more time. The y-intercept is -2, so we're going to click once on -2, and then we're going to travel along the slope, which is 1/3, or 1 along the y-axis and 3 along the x-axis, and click submit. Let's take a look at the second topic. The second topic is finding the slope from 2 points. Now when you find the slope from 2 points, you have to use the slope formula. The slope formula looks like this: y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And sometimes you'll get an answer that's a fraction, sometimes you'll get an answer that's a whole number or an integer, and sometimes you'll get an answer that has a special slope, right? Slopes that are horizontal or slopes that are vertical. Slopes that are horizontal have an answer where there's a 0 in the numerator. And slopes that are vertical or undefined have zeros in the denominator. So if your fraction has a 0 in it somewhere, you have to choose between 0 or undefined. So let's take a look at our values here. Our points are -8, -1, and -8, -11. So you can label your points like this: x1, y1, x2, y2, so that you place them appropriately in your subtraction fraction. So for us, our y2 is -11, and our y1 is -1. And then for our denominator, our x2 is -8, and our x1 is also -8. So you can use a calculator or you can compute this math mentally. So I'm going to open my calculator here, and I'm going to type in this giant subtraction fraction using my fraction button. Many of you have a calculator with a fraction button, and this is how you'll type it: the whole numerator and then the whole denominator. And if you don't have a subtraction button, a fraction button, you can do just the numerator first and then just the denominator second. Now let's take a look at what happens here. I get an error message. Now mine looks pretty fancy. Yours might just say error. But the reason for that is because -11 minus -1 is -10, but -8, take away -8 is 0. And anytime your fraction has a 0 in it somewhere, you have one of those special slopes. So a 0 in denominator is undefined because you cannot divide by 0, which is why my calculator said divide by 0 error. So instead of typing a number for our answer here, we're simply going to click that undefined button down there and click submit. All right, let's try this one more time. So our giant subtraction fraction here. So the first thing we do is we start the fraction, and then we find our two y values, -7 and -7, and -2 and 1. And this can happen here, another special situation. -7 minus -7, use your calculator if you need to. And -2 minus 1 is -3. But again, you'll see my fraction has a 0 in it, and when that happens, you have a special situation. And if you're not sure if it's 0 or undefined, simply pick up your calculator, and you can type that fraction in, or you can divide 0 divided by -3 and see what happens. See, you get a 0. Now, if it had been the other way around and I tried to divide by 0, I would have gotten that error message again. So I didn't get an error message for this fraction, so that means the answer is actually 0. All right, let's take a look at the third topic, writing equations of lines when you are given a graph. So the task here is to write the equation of a line in fully simplified slope-intercept form. And that's this format here, y equals mx plus b. So this number is easy to find because it's the y-intercept, and it's where the graph touches the y-axis. So for us, it's going to be a -5. This number here is a little more complicated to find because you need to start counting the directions, right? The delta y over the delta x. So between any 2 points, you're going to count those boxes between them. So I'm going to start with this point, the y-intercept, and I'm going to go to this point here. And let's see, I'm going to count delta y is 1, 2, 3. I have to move 4 units up along the y-axis, and then I have to move 3 units over to the right. That's +3 on the x-axis. So that means my slope is 4/3. That means 4/3 is the coefficient of x, and -5 is the constant. And this is my equation. Y equals 4/3 x minus 5. So we're going to type that down here in the answer box with a y, an equal sign. Oops. Make sure that x is on the side of the fraction, and click submit. Let's try this one more time. My y-intercept is -8, and I can count the slope between any 2 points I want. I mean, I literally could choose 2 points that are very far away from each other, but I'm going to choose to use 2 that are very close to each other because that will give it to me in simplest form. So my delta y is along the y-axis, I move down 1, which is -1. And then my delta x is to the right, so that's +1. So my equation's going to be y equals -1x minus 8, and I could even leave that 1 invisible if I'd like. When I type here, I can write y equals -x minus 8. Or you could type that 1 here, but this is in simplest form. All right, let's go back and take a look at the next section. Graphing ax plus by equals c from intercepts. So you notice this equation over here, it's not written in slope-intercept form, right? Because the y is not by itself. And when the x and the y are on the same side, you can find something called the x and y intercepts. So how you do that is you take this value of x and ignore or substitute a 0 in here, and you get one equation for x. And then for the other one, you're going to ignore the x value, and you're going to write the equation for y. Now sometimes you'll have coefficients in the front, like this one here has an invisible -1. So you need to get the variable by itself, but these two are your intercept points. So on the graph, the x-intercept is along the x-axis here, and we need to slide it to positive 6. And the y-intercept, which is the blue point, we need to slide down to negative 6. And now we have graphed it using the intercepts. So each time you get a new problem, you simply split it into two separate equations. So here for this question, the x value is 6x, and the answer stays the same. And the y value is positive 9y, and then you solve for each letter. So for us, x is going to be equal to positive 6, and for y is going to be equal to positive 4. Once you've calculated it, you can slide these red and blue intercept points to their appropriate values. X is 6, y is positive 4. And once you've done that, you can click Submit. All right, the next two lessons go back to Unit 1, solving equations using multiple steps. So for this one here, I have variables on both sides, right? I have x's on both sides of my equal sign. So you're going to use an addition or subtraction property of equality to get those x's together so they can be combined. So you can either add 5x to both sides, that's one correct math move, or you can add a single x to both sides. That's another correct math move. This is probably the more popular. Students like their x's on the left, but it doesn't matter which way you go. The next math move here is to get my constants on the same side. So I'm going to add 7 to both sides. And then I'm going to rewrite negative 4x is equal to negative 28. Use your calculator if you need to, and then divide by your coefficient and get your final answer, which for us will be positive 7. So you're going to need some scrap paper to finish this section. And again, you need to get your variables on the same side. So I'm going to add x to both sides this time and rewrite. And then I'm going to subtract 27 from both sides and rewrite. And then I'm going to isolate my x by dividing by my coefficient. And I get my final answer, which is negative 6. Okay, let's go back to our last topic here. In this section, we will not have variables on both sides, but we will have coefficients that are fractions. And when you have coefficients that are fractions, you have to do something a little bit different at the end. So we're going to clear our constant by adding 9 to both sides here. And we're going to get 30 is equal to 5/6 times c. Now I know for many of you, you want to divide by 5/6 here, because that's the opposite of multiplying. But we don't divide by fractions. We multiply by the reciprocal. And that's when you take the fraction and you flip the numerator and denominator. So these are multiplicative inverses. They make a 1. And 6/5 times 30, you can use your calculator if you need to. 6/5 times 30 is going to be 36. You type that here. And you'll definitely want to use your calculator to help you with these fractions. All right, that concludes homework number 10.